Welcome to the latest episode of Authenticated with your host, Kate McLeod. I am intrigued by people. People watching, I love. People learning, that's where I'm insatiably curious. I'm interested in the why and how of the creative mind's pattern of thinking, the subtext to the creative thinker, or in its more conscious and malleable form, the creative conscious. Because when you are so clear on yourself via the triad of consciousnesses, then you become reflective to others. Meeting yourself is an infectious practice because what feels good is infectious and something I think we could all use a good dose of. So join me in conversations with a diverse arsenal of creative thinkers, from artists to entrepreneurs to serial thinkers ready to optimize their creative conscious. With me, self-made and self-proclaimed creative entrepreneur. Sounds hot, right? Welcome to the podcast.
Oh, Kate, thank you so much for having me.
I'm so happy you're here. This is Andrea Syglowski.
Hello,
You
hello.
have been having an absolutely incredible career for as long as I've known you and as much as I could look back to before I knew you. But what's struck me so much recently is that you have been working consistently with every contemporary foundational playwright in the city.
Yes, that is true. And I sometimes take that for granted and I completely forget. But earlier this year, I did an interview with Gerald Brunner for Forbes, and she pointed it out and she read those names to me. And at that time, I hadn't yet worked with John Patrick Shanley. I had just been cast in Brooklyn Laundry. But yes, when I was in college, Teresa Rebeck was one of my favorite playwrights. Obviously, Stephen Adly Girgis, and my love, Martina Malyok, who went to Juilliard, and I met her a little bit out of school, and she's sort of responsible for my off-Broadway debut, which was, I think, in 2017, 2018, maybe.
Wow.
So not that long ago, but I had been working regionally a bunch, too. So I feel it's so blessed in that sense.
Yeah. The first thing I ever saw you in was Halfway Bitches Go to Heaven.
Oh, really?
Yeah. That was an incredible piece. There was a rawness to it that was so beautifully displayed by all of you.
I think Stephen's probably our best, in my humble opinion, one of our best living playwrights. I obviously know him personally, but what he's said, that piece was so special, and it hasn't been done since. I mean, it's 18 actors and a goat, so I imagine it's quite challenging to produce. But what he does like nobody else is he captures the diversity of New York City. And he can completely transform and take on voices that are unlike his own in a way that I have not experienced. And there's so much heart.
I'm glad you say that, because from my vantage point, the way I perceive him as an artist, though I haven't had the pleasure of meeting him in person, though I have done his pieces before, he follows hunches of who people are. He, to me, reads as finding someone's vulnerabilities, leaning on them very hard and following from them. I would imagine that he's a very good collaborator to work with, because I feel like he would have a very specific understanding of how to listen to actors.
Well, he is an actor. He started as an actor. His dream was to be an actor. He studied with Bill Esper and Maggie Flanagan. And he went to SUNY Albany and with John Ortiz, who, directed Halfway Bitches Go Straight to Heaven. And I believe that was his directorial debut. But they've collaborated together for a million years. So, yeah, he has an understanding of actors. He knows how to speak to them about intentions, what a character's desires are, different beats, shifts in the scene. But, I mean, I think he, like John, like Teresa, like Martina, and all the other brilliant playwrights that I'm not naming that I've worked with, and will work with. I think in the fall I'm going to be working with Sarah Ganscher, who's amazing, who you may know. I think that when you say a rawness, all of those great playwrights want to get down to what makes us human.
Yes.
And they all try to expose, I think, what is beautiful, ugly, vulnerable, fierce. It's why actors are so drawn to doing Stephen's work and John's work and Teresa's work and Martina's work. It's because it's just so human.
Yes. Yeah, and I particularly enjoy those artists myself because I feel like my mission as an artist, because I struggled with not feeling seen for a majority of my life, when I finally became that answer for myself to see myself and that being enough, I felt like I was finally able to see others as well. And with the way that they set up their worlds and their plays and their people who are in them, I don't want to say there's a lack of judgment, but they're presented in such a way that there's room for me to see them and for them to see me.
Yeah.
Where there's an awareness that the audience is there and a constant communication is happening.
Totally.
And there's space for everybody there.
Yeah.
And that's special.
Well, that's huge. And, you know, Stephen McKinley Henderson was in between Riverside and Crazy. He also teaches acting. He was a guest acting teacher when I was at Juilliard.
Okay.
And he would say, you know, don't get it right, get it true.
Ooh.
And I think all of those writers, definitely Stephen. And I mean, writing is I think the most difficult thing that somebody can do. Really, truly. And when you're doing it, all of those writers, but especially him, just because I know him probably more personally than the others, he puts himself through what the character is going through so that he can understand it as he's writing it.
Yeah.
And that is costly. It costs him something. But on the other hand, what you have to have you have to have an expectation of yourself as an actor. When you're doing work like that, it has to cost you something too.
It does.
It does.
And it does because vulnerability, you know, authenticity is vulnerable. And synonymously, authenticity and vulnerability both beget the same thing from the people that it's offered to.
Yeah.
And so it has to be an expensive sort of emotional thing for everybody involved because everything is. Just day to day is. You know, being human is emotionally expensive.
Yeah.
If you want to be curious about yourself.
Yeah.
You know, and others. And I'm glad you brought up Juilliard. I have questions about Juilliard.
Absolutely.
What was it like?
Everybody asks me this in every interview. They're like, what was that like?
Well, because you...
Okay, well, let me ask you.
Yes.
What would be the assumption?
The assumption. I mean, institutionalized learning is always going to be some sort of particular experience, as always. It doesn't matter where you go, especially for something like the arts.
Yeah.
But you've stuck to so many mentors and you've elicited such beautiful connections with people. I've witnessed you do this, you know, in the workshop room when we worked at the Atlantic. And I recognized something in you that I recognized in myself where I felt like I was surrounded in grad school and undergrad school by a sea of people who weren't, like it wasn't, how do I say this?
You felt isolated?
I felt incredibly isolated, but I felt that I was able to get everything I needed out of that school from my professors. And I felt like the journey was correct for me, but I felt everyone in my class constantly talking about what was wrong and what wasn't. And I was just never focused on that. I was focused on what was right so it would work.
Well, I'm 10 years older than you. So we were growing up at a different time during learning. And I know that, you know, Juilliard can have a reputation for being pretty brutal. I mean, there's a reason people refer to it as the jail yard. There used to be a cut system. So that when I got there, Jim Houghton, who is this incredible artistic director, he passed away about 7 years ago. He ran the Signature Theater as well. And when he built the Signature Theater that is now on, you know, 42nd Street between 9th and 10th, he was very careful to not have any stage doors, which means all of the artists, the actors, and the audience members had to go in and out of the same door, and they had to mingle in the lobby. So he created this space that was communal, and there's 3 different theaters and all of these people working together. But the idea was that there's no separation between you and me. So that was the man. He happened to be at Juilliard for 7 years. I was there for 4 of the 7.
Okay.
He himself was totally authentic. He would go after playwrights like Sam Shepard when he was starting Signature and say, okay, what's the play that you have that nobody wants to produce? Let's do it. I had that sort of mission statement for a long time. What was different about Juilliard during the Jim Houghton years was that there was no cut system. I felt a camaraderie and a closeness with my company members because the training was so challenging. So we needed to sort of hold on to each other to get one another through the day, which would sometimes be 11, 12-hour days, 6 days a week.
Yeah.
The acting profession isn't that different. So I would bemoan that schedule when really there was a reason we were training that way. It's because the life of an artist is similarly, when you're working and even when you're not working, sometimes even more when you're not working, extremely taxing. We had a playwrights program. Marcia Norman and Chris Durang were in charge of the playwrights program when I was there.
Yeah.
Chris just passed away. He was an amazing soul. We worked with the playwrights. I was like lucky enough to be sort of a fan favorite amongst the playwrights and amongst the playwright program. So I would workshop plays with them all the time and then read them in front of the entire school. It was my favorite thing to do at school. Some actors in my class were better at the classics. I loved the conversation, and I love conversations between playwright and actor. That collaboration is so important to me. I was lucky in that my undergrad had a similar sort of, the nature of what we do can be competitive.
Yes.
The ego, you kind of always have to keep it in check and try to understand, is my ego asking me to do this project? Or is it going to fulfill me or make me grow as a person and an artist? Right?
Yeah.
It's a difficult question, and you're going to do both, and that's okay.
That's so huge. I think I just learned something. I think that's the great name to name what it was I wasn't interested in playing that.
Right.
Right. Because I want to do what you're doing. I want to have the conversation with the playwright. I want to get down to the nitty gritty. I want to explore. I want to feel. I want to name things that were unnamed for me before. I wanted to grow and not so much about the competitiveness of it, but it's inherent in the profession.
It's inherent in humanity.
Yes.
I mean, psychologists and psychiatrists have been talking about the ego,
Yeah.
And having a strong sense of self-worth is different than having an ego. Having inflated ego stems from insecurity.
Yeah.
And having a strong sense of self-worth stems from saying, I'm worthy because I exist.
Yeah.
And when you accept that, therein lies authenticity. I will say that I'm not fully there yet. That's a constant daily practice.
Yes.
The ego will always get involved, and I have to talk to it and say, okay, step aside, miss. We have, me and my higher power, we have this taken care of. It takes such an act of faith and trust to be able to do what we're doing.
Faith and trust in yourself, but also in others. You have to make it more of a community thing, because whenever I think of ego, it feels so isolating.
Right.
Itself, within yourself, which is even more isolating in an abundance of people. It's like you have to make that decision consciously and make that effort consciously to turn outward and to make it about community and to make it about the whole living organism and not just the singular one that you're coming from that singular perspective on. I love that.
But, I think you gain respect from your peers. As you said, like in the workshop, when I was doing Dig, I was so floored because I did this play at Primary Stages earlier this year called Dig by Teresa Rebeck. And every night there was somebody from our community there that I had worked with in a workshop or in a play. It was the most moving part of doing that.
Yeah.
Because there is a time when you're creating where you have to isolate, even as an actor. You have to get inside your imagination and inside your heart that feels very vulnerable and expose certain truths about the life you've lived. I think, like, for me, this is different for everybody, but great acting happens when the character and my lived experience collide into one another to create a truthful yet transformative performance. That's what I go to the theater to see. That's what we respond to emotionally. And yet at the same time, Cecily Strong, who I just did a play with, Brooklyn Laundry, incredible actor, also an incredible comedic actor. she did Saturday Night Live for 10 years. But if you watch her on that show, there's something bubbling underneath. And yet we need comedy, we need entertainment, we need escapism. There's room for all of it.
Yes.
And there's no reason for, who knows, maybe in 10 years I'll be doing stand-up. Why not? I have no idea.
Yeah.
But I know that for now, and what I have wanted to do is to just be the best actor I can possibly be.
Wherever that takes you.
Wherever that takes me.
Which means your authenticity being at the forefront of your artistry.
Yeah.
And that's what's so great. And that's why different variations of acting like SNL and things like that are so highly relatable, because there is authenticity in that.
Absolutely.
Things are only funny because they're relatable.
Exactly.
So it's not like one genre of acting alleviates you from what it takes to actually display yourself like that. It's a very big, vulnerable act, and you have to make that conscious decision without your ego saying, I am worthy of being an example, and I'm going to lead by example by displaying myself if it's stand-up or something like that. I'm going to lead by example and be up here, and I'm going to be vulnerable in front of everybody. I'm going to choose to be seen and also choose to want to be seen. And I hope that you learn something when you walk out. You feel seen, you feel a better community. And when you say that someone in your community was there every single night, did that make the community feel bigger or smaller?
Oh, it was huge.
That's what I would imagine.
And I've spent the last week, we closed Brooklyn Laundry a week ago, basically going to the theater every day to try to show up for the people who came for me. Because I do know now, like having worked in the professional theater for like 10 years, look, the take home, there will be, you don't make a lot of money, and what you sacrifice, a sacrifice is a difficult word, but what it costs, I think that's what we're talking about, is great.
Yeah.
It costs a lot to do bad theater, and it costs a lot to do great theater. It always costs you something.
Yes.
And doing 8 shows a week is no joke.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
The stamina for that alone.
Definitely. We are bred a certain way. I am a highly, highly sensitive person. Not everybody has that, like, I can cry at the drop of a hat or laugh in an instant. I think some people are definitely built for it, but I think anybody who would want to be an actor can be an actor.
Yes.
That's my personal opinion. But
where does that owning of your sensitivity, where does that sit in you?
Girl, it is still something I'm trying to accept in myself, because it's not being vulnerable or being sensitive or being emotional has had negative connotations, especially in our society. We are raised to go to school, to get straight A's, to be pragmatic and practical and make a certain amount of money and have the house and have the kids. There are certain ways, especially America, we live in a capitalist society, so sensitivity is not necessarily, I don't know if you remember when Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton were, going for the presidency.
Yeah.
And, with Hillary, especially for women, but it was that what people loved about Trump was that he was unemotional, even though he was like a little baby. But
yeah,
Hillary,
otherwise
it was
for
like,
him.
She's too cold. She's too emotional. She'll have this, it was just like, at some point, you have to know that there's going to be people that like you. There's going to be people that don't like you. It's none of your business.
Yeah.
It's not in your control. Like, your business is to stay true to yourself. And that whole accepting of the highly sensitive person in me, that's like years of like self-work and therapy and recovery. And it's an endless practice.
It is. Compassion's not easy.
Compassion is not easy.
Especially when it comes to yourself. And these things that you just named, I wish that they were glorified. I wish that they were rewarded. And unfortunately, they're not. And I'm personally more interested in a world where they are.
Yeah.
Which is why I love the art so much.
Oh, yeah.
I try so hard, too, with my own self-work and working for years on myself and embracing who I am. I refuse to let these people who don't value what I know inherently is so valuable within me, if they don't find it valuable, I refuse to let them get in the way of me finding a deeper connection to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because absolutely not.
Yeah.
There's
no.
only so much time.
Yeah, that's true. I can say I've wasted a lot of time in my life. It starts at a really young age, but being concerned about what other people think. And that's where you go, oh, I need more self-worth. And that people talk about boundaries in different ways, but I never realized that having a boundary is, oh, you think that of me. I don't need to think that of myself. That's
Correct.
where that stops. And in some ways, I feel I've had such artistic success, like in my work, but I haven't had a lot of commercial success. Not many people will know outside of New York City, like know my name anywhere. And I think in some ways that may change in the next 10 or 15 years.
I have a feeling it will.
And I needed to get spiritually to a place where I could not crumble or break down based on media perception of what I had to offer.
Ooh, that's an even harder layer to it, which is trusting the timing and trusting the universe.
The timing.
Having a good connection with the universe. I believe in this. I call them universal winks, but at some moment when the frequency at which I operate meets the frequency of the universe, and the universe kind of winks at me to let me know that it's like,
it's okay.
Yeah, it's on the right path. I lamented my past self for so long, being like, why didn't she pop off? Why didn't I follow that one win longer? Maybe I would have had this more commercial success by now. But now I think I wouldn't have hired myself until 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And also I didn't need that version of myself in the past to get commercial success. What I needed was for her to continue growing on her own before she was ready to lead by example.
Totally.
Because ever since I was a kid, I've always wanted to lead by example.
And you do.
Thank you.
Thank you. You do.
I've always wanted to make people happy, and I've realized that it's more to turn to make people happy with themselves.
Yeah, totally.
Not that that's entirely my responsibility, but I can do my best to be happy myself and then to share that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Something I'm so curious to learn about from you. So, are you a pretty visual person?
Yes.
Okay. If your career was summed up in an image that had color, shape, and texture, what would it look like or feel like from beginning until now?
What would it look like or feel like from beginning until now? A wave. That's the first image that comes to mind.
Yeah.
It's like the epitome of ebb and flow and crest, and that wave at times could be, harsh and I may fall down, or it could be very comforting. And there's moments where it's just distilled, where nothing is happening. But in fact, it's those moments, as I've gotten older, the thing that there's a time to reap and there's a time to sow. That wave has that same image. I don't stress as much with the times where nothing is happening, because in fact, the most is happening internally for me when nothing is happening.
Yes.
And that internal sort of spiritual growth that's happening when I so-called nothing is happening in my career, that's what gives me the energy to bring to whatever that next thing is. And I've been, I did 2 shows back to back this year. It's been an amazing, tremendous year. The best year of my life by far. But I do have 3 or 4-ish months off maybe. And this is like the time to travel. It's the time to paint. It's the time to journal. It's the time to take in other people's art.
Yeah.
To be inspired, so that when I go to the table, I have something new to offer. You always want to surprise yourself, I think.
I would hope so. That's
Yeah.
how I want to live. I'm curious in surprising myself and in continuing to inspire myself to change direction.
Yeah.
I'm not interested in humans who are always the same. I'm very...
No. I think most people who are drawn to acting have that
instinctual. That is true.
Yeah.
So that power of a wave, when you say that, it makes me think it's so organic, it's so alive, and it's something to be watched and enjoyed more than it is to be conquered or controlled.
Yeah, exactly.
The same attraction that I have to water and waves, I have to fire. Watching,
Yeah.
you could just watch them endlessly. do you think there's ever a world in which you take that feeling, that visual, that magnetic force, and you harness it and you move forward with it?
That's so interesting. And you harness it and you move forward with it.
Because to me, that sounds like a superpower.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's your work on stage.
Yeah.
That's the acting work that you talk about. That's like harnessing all of that chaos. And then I can't believe I used the word chaos, but it is a little chaotic. And I'm allowing for that to come out of you and forward. But I see what you mean. I'm not sure. I don't know if I would ever try to harness any of my harness is a tough word for me, like any creative instincts. I think I just have to sort of like, they tell me.
Ooh.
I actually have to follow. The more I try to control anything in my life, the worse outcome.
Yeah.
You know, expectation breeds resentment. It's like that trying to harness. No, you kind of have to follow, get really quiet and listen to that voice that tells you, okay, this is the next thing and this is the next thing. And so no, I try to let like that creative instinct in me breathe. There is certain practical elements of being an actor, like learning your lines. Like, you know, that's where I would say I have to get harnessed and sit down and do it. And I'm not great at it. If I have an audition and I have to prepare in 48 hours, I'm like, I cannot focus. If I know of a play that I'm doing, I start prepping 6 months in advance. I mean, not everybody's like this, but I like to have that long breathing room to learn my lines and let things ruminate, so that when I come to the first rehearsal, it looks easy and all I have to do is be with the other people around me, because I've spent all of that solo time alone.
So it's the force that you have to use to get
That's
yourself,
the harnessing.
Yeah, to get yourself into a place to listen.
Yes.
So when did you...
And it takes a lot of effort for me.
Yeah.
Because I have a little ADHD.
No, it's okay. So, hey, we all need breathing room.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
it's the same reason why we're told when you are acting, if you are not breathing, the audience is not breathing.
Yeah.
Like you have to breathe
Yeah.
through the whole thing, and you have to be kind to yourself and follow the process, and also trust that it is the process, because I feel like it's so easy to get in your head and just think, oh, this is me procrastinating, or like this. It's like, no, this is just your process.
Yeah.
Because even these 48-hour auditions beget jobs, which you are slaying.
Yes. However, I will tell you that the majority of my work in the theater, I have not auditioned for.
I love that.
When I did Dig, it was like John Patrick Shanley saw that play, and so he thought of me for this part. Work does beget work in that way. I'm still learning how to audition because of the things that make people great actors and great artists. Those things sometimes can feel like incongruent with giving a good audition, which is making some decisions and beats and making a couple choices as an actor.
Yeah.
I'm like a little bit more instinctual, and I like for things to come to me rather than controlling or forcing. So my best auditions are when I'm totally free.
Okay.
But that's a learning. I'm still learning. Listen, self-tapes, they weren't a thing a few years ago. We're all still learning how to do that. And some people are great auditioning, and what they do in the audition room is what you get at the final performance. And I don't want to work that way.
I don't either. I don't want to be the same person I was yesterday.
No, if you're working, you have a 3-week, 4-week rehearsal period so that things grow. You don't want to come to a performance on the opening and see the same exact performance on the closing. You want it to grow and live and get deeper and more complicated. And most artists, I think, who are worth their salt want to work with actors who are like that. Like I get a little nervous about someone who may want to paint me by numbers and say, move here, do this, do that, say it this way. For some actors, that's great. And for me, it's not as a comfortable work environment.
I mean, that makes sense, because you, to me, just sound like an incredible listener. And if you're not around other listeners, then there's nothing to be heard.
Yeah, that's
you
true.
know? And do you think there was a moment that you really realized that that's how you worked? Or is there a moment where you thought, oh, my gift is listening, and that's how I operate?
I think that, yes, I think I did. I mean, I was taught, like, when I first started actor training at 18 or 19 by this amazing acting teacher. Her name's Laura Zane. She's now in New Mexico. Acting is reacting. I think she came from do you know Zane?
That's so crazy. I worked with her when I was 16 years old at USC.
Are you kidding?
No. You said that and I just teleported.
Oh my.
To half my life ago.
Oh my God. I would have been just out of school.
Wow. No, she made such an impact on me.
Me too.
That is a universal wink.
Yeah, that's a universal wink. I still talk to her. I still stay in touch with her.
I have no idea if she'll remember me.
Well, she'll listen to this podcast.
Yeah.
No, she changed my life. She and Brent Blair at that school changed my life. I learned how to act from her. Juilliard was icing on the cake. That's the thing is I do these podcasts and everybody's like, well, tell me about Juilliard. Tell me about Juilliard. And I'm like, yeah, but there's always this one acting teacher that comes. And when you're that young, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, you are like a sponge. So everything she said, I don't have any journals from Juilliard. I do have my acting journals from when I was working with Zane at USC. Everything that she taught, acting is reacting. Mm-hmm. I learned that I had to do my homework. This might come clear, may ring a bell. Do my homework and my imagination work. She taught it as a practice.
Yeah.
It's a half hour a day at least. I put in much more than that, but and then come to play pretend so that you're not going to know what you're doing until the person in front of you see what they're doing.
Yeah. You do your homework, but then you throw it away and then you're there to listen.
Yeah.
Oh.
So as you were saying that, I couldn't not give props to Laura Zane.
Yeah.
She was my first acting teacher that really had a profound effect on me. And Brent Blair, he taught, Kristen Linklater, and I have skills that I learned at Juilliard, but I still use his vocal warm-up that I learned when I was 18.
Wow.
So 20 years later.
Wow. That's incredible.
That's a universal wink, Laura Zane.
Yeah, it is, Laura Zane. Hey. I've met a couple of your students.
You have?
Yes. And they all speak so highly of you. And
I love teaching.
I was going to ask about your love for teaching.
Oh, man. I was just thinking, I got to get back to it. I started teaching out of during COVID over Zoom.
Yeah.
I started teaching acting over Zoom. In fact, Zane came to one of my acting classes over Zoom. It was such a full circle moment because I was like, I'm teaching this acting class. Do you want to come in and listen?
Yeah.
I was so nervous. I think that acting and teaching are so close together because great teaching is also great listening and paying attention. Mm-hmm. I have a really difficult time paying attention to anything in this, it's hard for me to sit still in a movie. When someone's acting in front of me, it forces me to pay attention and listen.
Yeah.
I got to get back to teaching. I'm going to teach in August, I think.
Yeah.
August, September. I was going to apply for a teaching fellowship at Juilliard, but I completely missed the deadline. So next year, that was a beautiful discovery that happened in COVID. I taught a donation-based acting class. I put it on Instagram, and then I had 30 students. And I was like, how did these people... And they were all incredible actors. Some of them my peers at Juilliard, people who came out at NYU, Yale, students that were at the actor studio. I mean, it was the highlight of COVID for me.
Well, I think it was for your students as well.
And for my students. It was a really special time. And I'm actually only now starting to think back and reflect. I was in touch with them up until this year, and I will be in touch with them again, I promise you. But it was like half therapy, half therapy, half acting class, because of what we were going through. So there was space and time to acknowledge where you're at. We would all go around the room and answer the 4 questions: I am, I want, I feel, I need.
I love that.
So that's a play. You know what? I'll just be an acting teacher for a second.
Please.
If you're struggling in a rehearsal space or an audition, and if you can take a moment and breathe and just answer the questions for you. I am, I feel, I want, I need for you. And then ask them for your character. That's usually enough to spring you into action. And that was like the basis of what we were doing weekly during a really difficult time. Or we would do 1-minute shares at the beginning of class. This is what happened to me today. So we could let it go and then just come to the work fresh. You know, I do think that that's part of what we're saying, is that you have to leave space for yourself. Giving space to yourself gives space to the characters in the creative process.
And everyone around you.
And everyone around you.
I love that you say that, because for me, naming an emotion, naming what is happening, naming how I'm feeling, naming what it's doing to me is so important, because I feel like that's a lot of what generates fear, is not doing those things, and fear inhibits you. Mm-hmm. I'm more interested in telling people genuinely, this is how I feel. This is what's happening. And that is how happier communities happen.
Yeah, I think that's kind of like the theme of our conversation today, because it brings us back to that being okay with being a highly sensitive person and allowing yourself to be who you are. You know, I think like language is one way to communicate. There's a lot of different ways to communicate. You know, acting is so beautiful because it's communicating through human behavior. And then the words are the icing on the cake, which is, or the tip of the iceberg.
What do your characters teach you? The places you go when you're exploring, what do you learn?
My God, I just had a flash of a character I played at Juilliard that came to mind that I haven't thought of
Please.
in years.
Well, they clearly stay with you.
No, it was like, well, yes, I think like there are certain playwrights. I feel like fortunate enough to work with those living playwrights who are here that we've mentioned, but working on Shakespeare and Chekhov and Tennessee Williams and Ibsen, you know, I know there are many more classical playwrights. Those are the ones that I was introduced to, that I worked on during actor training. Mm-hmm. I have this like, I'm remembering playing like Amanda in The Pretty Trap, which is a short play of Tennessee Williams. For some reason, Tennessee Williams is at the forefront of my mind. In fact, I must do Tennessee Williams soon. That's like the big thing. My characters, all characters have a certain element of resilience because drama is drama because it's drama.
Yes.
And most characters are at a turning point in their lives, or they are going to instigate a turning point in somebody else's life. Most drama is based on that. Mm-hmm. And all of the characters I play are survivors in some way, shape, or form. You know, when you think of Bella, and Bella did not survive halfway, but just go straight to heaven. But she sure as hell tried up until the end, until she overdosed. But that was her way of trying to cope and live anyway. She didn't have that in mind. Mm-hmm. You know, all of those characters in Chekhov, I just saw Uncle Vanya at Lincoln Center, was so excellent.
I bet. Especially in that space.
Yes.
Going back to what you said about the signature, my mother is an architect. And what I love about her work is she is always having a conversation with the environment that the home is sitting in.
Yeah, yeah.
And so when you talk about the signature theater, it is so important to include the space in which you are into what it is that you're doing. Yeah. Yeah.
I remember when Jim Houghton showed us, like, before the signature was built, these models in he lived in Manhattan Plaza, in his garage of that gear. It was, that space. It was so gorgeous.
That's cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's special.
But I think that's the thing, is that I think all in Chekhov and Tennessee Williams, and it's like the will to live. And humor is always a part of it. You cannot ask an audience member to cry if you don't also let them laugh. Some people are just like inherently funny on some level.
The visual of a heartbeat comes to mind, where you go boop, 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 boop. Mm-hmm. And if it's flatlined, you're dead. And so we have to have moments of levity, moments that just take us to the deepest depths. And when I found myself at like really dark moments, personally, I've always found myself laughing. at some point, because I think that's a means of survival too, to balance.
Totally.
I'm thinking about this now because I'm reading Three Body Problem, but
Oh, wow.
oh, it's you need to read
Yeah,
it. It's fabulous. You know, we have all these patterns proved by science, but what happens if there's no patterns? You know, what if life does live like that? And I think that I've always found comfort in knowing that there is structure somehow in life, but that I get to live however I want in it. But to kind of think that the structure is out of it is a little exciting and thrilling too. Because I love the visual of a wave and to be a listener and to let things take you where they're going to take you. Where does your faith in that come from?
Listening is a practice. And I think the reason I've gotten good at it on stage is because I'm not actually quite great at it in my real life.
Wow.
I came from a family, beautiful, beautiful family. I love you all. They don't listen to each other. You know, they talk over one another. My mom's Italian, and they, you know, it's like there is chaos.
Yeah.
It was, you had to sort of, in the family structure where I was growing up, you had to pay very close attention so that you could get in what you needed to say. In my life, when I'm now functioning in my personal life, as I'm sure my close loves will be able to attest, you know, I'm sometimes like talking too much because I fear that I won't have the opportunity to talk. And I have to keep myself in check and say, stop talking, listen. You know, what I love about acting is that somebody else did that work for me. It's like somebody else wrote what I have to say and what I have to listen to. And it's a practice. It's one that I'd like to get better at in my life.
That's the structure.
That's the structure.
And that's where you get to, you hit me in the heartstrings so hard with all that. That resonated.
Yeah. I think it resonates with a lot of people.
Yeah. I'm fascinated by the malleability of words and what societal connotations paint over a word. You said chaos earlier. I love the word chaos. And chaos has such a negative connotation in a lot of circumstances, but I just think that it's something to be welcomed because it's something to figure out. And clearly chaos happens when the order is not working. And the chaos is meant to be there to incite something in you to get it elsewhere, because you can't live in chaos. But you also can't live in uniformity all the time.
Well, that's the greatest thing about working with a script, right?
Yes.
Is that the structure is there, and the great playwrights are going to want, you know, Shanley, when we were working on this scene in Brooklyn Laundry, he had written the structure. He wasn't interested in having like a very clear arc in any way. He was interested in pushing up against the structure, the chaos. Most great writers want you to go to the extreme that you can possibly go to within the structure that contains you. I mean, Shakespeare is such a great, that's why they say act on the line. The structure is there so that disorder can happen within the order. We are only free sometimes. I mean, biology is random and chaotic.
Yeah.
I mean, there's chaos and, you know.
You could take a 23andMe, and so could your two siblings.
Yes.
You know, and that's me naming siblings. I don't know if you are one of three. I am
one of three.
Oh, I'm one of three as well. But you can all take a DNA test, and it's all going to turn out different.
Yeah.
Even though you are from the same gene pool, it's just that you came from the same pool. It's not like you're carbon copies of one another.
No. No one is. That's everybody's. There's only one you.
There is.
In all of time. It's crazy.
Yeah, and that's just how fascinating humans get to be, because the variations are endless. They're infinite. And no two people are raised by the same two people. I believe that every single human is an absolute miracle.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, what is it? 1 in 4 billion chance that you're born or something like that? Maybe I'm making up those numbers, but it feels real. And
And then beyond that, you get to where you are by so many circumstances that have to happen to you and happen by your choice, and a million moving parts that you'll never have full control of. That actually is a really beautiful perspective, I feel like, to offer a young artist, is to say, there is structure. It's the script. Mm-hmm. The script has already taken care of so much for you. Mm-hmm. And so you are meant to be chaotic in it.
Let yourself go.
Let yourself go.
Let yourself go.
Yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah, I think that's true.
Yeah.
And the better the writer, the easier it is for you to be able to let go inside the script.
Mm-hmm. Doing less is a practice, though, and it's not easy.
That's true. But you have to do less to do more.
Yes.
Because there's different, you know, as Zane would say, we're not human doings, we're human beings. You know, it's so funny that's...
I'm still floored by that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. That was such a time and place. And in my adulthood now, I have such a connection to my younger self because I'm still taking care of her. Mm-hmm. And I'm still letting her know that we're okay.
Yeah.
And she's still with me. And so the fact that connection just happened is blowing my mind still. It makes me so happy.
Oh, yeah, she was huge.
Yeah. And just talking
also
to you.
Also being a young woman at an young age and coming across somebody like her who was just, yeah.
Her style had a huge impact on me as well.
Yeah.
Because I've always wanted to play on the scale of masculinity and femininity in the way that felt authentic to me.
Yeah.
Especially in the way I dress every single day and the way I decorate, the way I operate. And I don't ever want to be bound to one box of what I should do.
Yeah, of course.
And I felt that permission for the first time
from her,
where I thought, oh, wow, I can do all of that. Mm-hmm. That's cool. That's my scale to play on. It's not the scale for someone to tell me where to be on.
Yeah.
It has been absolutely incredible talking to you.
Yeah, you too. My God, what a talk.
You are just fabulous and such a giver. And I feel so inspired and fulfilled.
It was a great conversation. Thanks for having me on. I forgot we were even recording or doing this podcast situation.
That's good.
But I wish you all of the luck in the world. You too.
Give me one dream that's going to come true.
In the next year or like
whenever
in my life?
In your life.
You know, I'd like to star in on a TV show.
I see that.
I'd like to be not a series regular in like a great drama. I'm watching The Sopranos for the first time. Like, if I could do one thing in my life, like Edie Falco's work in that show has been so inspirational to me.
Yep.
If I could do one thing like that so that I could share my gifts with a much larger audience, I would be thrilled.
That's happening.
And that's the latest. I'm honored to have been part of your thinking sphere today. Feel free to share, like, and subscribe on this platform or follow and participate on any of my social media platforms. If this practice intrigues you as much as it does me, then join us in the Me3 community, where we will work directly and you will curate a mindful method of thinking to define your own creative conscious. Thanks for listening to the latest episode of Authenticated. I love that you're here.